Recently, there has been a conflict between Israel and Palestine. The Israeli embassy in China hoped that the Chinese government would condemn Hamas terrorist attacks. However, the Chinese government has consistently refused to condemn Hamas. This political stance isn't surprising, and it's clear that the Israeli government may have unrealistic expectations when it comes to China. This may be based on their past economic and military cooperation. In the 1980s, Israel was one of the Western countries that provided significant military assistance to China. China's J-10 fighter jet, PL-8 air-to-air missiles, early warning aircraft technology, and drone technology all had origins in Israel. Let's start with the story of the J-10 fighter jet. Many in the military community know that the J-10, developed by Chengdu Aircraft Industry Group, can be considered China's first domestically developed fighter jet. When it was first introduced, it had various issues, such as the fact that it couldn't be washed with water but had to be wiped clean, as reported on Chinese Central Television. However, the J-10 can be seen as a relatively successful domestically developed fighter jet compared to China's previous fighter jet development efforts. Before the J-10, China's primary fighter jets were the J-7 and J-8. The J-7 was essentially a copy of the Soviet MiG-21, and the J-8 was an enlarged, elongated, and upgraded version of the J-7 with a very similar appearance. In terms of design, the two were nearly identical, with the main difference being that the J-8 had an elongated fuselage with two engines instead of one. Even the MiG-21 was an outdated fighter jet developed by the Soviet Union in 1955. During China's close relationship with the Soviet Union, they imported the technical drawings of the MiG-21 for domestic production. However, during the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, China faced numerous issues with its fighter jets. The J-8 was initiated in 1965 and made its maiden flight in 1969. However, the Cultural Revolution immediately followed, and in the following 10 years, the J-8 experienced significant problems, including supersonic flutter issues and in-flight engine shutdowns. It took 14 years for the J-8 to finally reach maturity after the end of the Cultural Revolution in 1979. Within the People's Liberation Army, the J-8 had a nickname, the Peace Dove. Why was it called the Peace Dove? Early J-8 aircraft had dreadful fire control radar, initially using domestically developed Type 204 radar and later an improved Type 208. The Type 204 radar had a detection range of only 21 kilometers. Essentially, it was nearly blind. Not only could the J-8 not see far, it didn't have suitable air-to-air missiles. The domestically developed PL-4 air-to-air missile had so many issues that the project was canceled. The Aspide missile, imported from Italy, couldn't be used because it was not compatible with the radar. In other words, China's most advanced fighter jets of the 1980s, the J-7 and J-8, were at the level of Soviet MiG-21s from the 1950s. Despite that, even copying them had its problems. So, how did China successfully develop the J-10 and overcome the difficulties they had faced with previous fighter jets? There was only one way, by importing foreign technology and even foreign blueprints. In the 1980s, it was a honeymoon period for China and the United States. In 1979, Deng Xiaoping initiated the Sino-Vietnamese War, which had no military significance but was politically significant because it showed China's alignment with the West. China decided to embrace the West, and to gain Western trust after years of hostility, they had to do something significant. So, throughout the 1980s, not only did Western capital and businesses enter China, but there was also increased military cooperation. China imported various weapons and equipment from the West, including Black Hawk helicopters from the United States, Dolphin helicopters from France, and even two General Electric LM-2500 engines. China also imported the Aspide air-to-air missile from Italy. There were even rumors that the United States was considering selling low-end versions of the F-16 fighter jet to China. In the period of close cooperation between China and the West, the Chinese government reverse-engineered many of the weapons and equipment they had introduced, such as the Z-20, which is a copy of the American Black Hawk helicopter and looks almost identical. For instance, China's Z-8 is a knockoff of the French Super Freeland helicopter, and the Z-9 is inspired by the French Dauphin helicopter. The famous General Electric LM2500 gas turbine engine was also attempted to be reverse-engineered by the Chinese, but they couldn't meet the required standards, so they gave up and instead imported the UGT 25000 engine from Ukraine, which was later widely used on Chinese warships. During the Sino-Western cooperation in the 80s, Israel was the country that provided the most military assistance. China's J-10, in fact, was developed based on Israel's Lavi fighter jet. First, it's essential to clarify a misconception. Israel had two Lion-related fighter jets. One was called Lavi, and the other was simply KFIR. The KFIR fighter jet was developed by Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, who stole technical blueprints from France's Dassault Aviation and used them as a foundation to develop this aircraft. This fighter jet was quite different from China's J-10, both in its aerodynamic layout and technical background. The KFIR had dual intake ducts on its sides, using a triangular wing design with fixed canards on both sides of the aircraft. These canards did not pivot. In contrast, when we look at the J-10, it uses a different aerodynamic layout. It has a single central intake duct, a triangular wing design, and two canards located underneath the fuselage. The technical characteristics of the J-10 were inherited from Israel's Lavi fighter jet. Now, let's delve into Israel's Lavi fighter jet. At first, it was designed as a low-cost, lightweight fighter aircraft mainly for air combat. The development of the Lavi was an evolution of Israel's first domestically produced aircraft, the Nesher. For Lavi, the position of the canards was moved forward compared to the Nesher, and the air intake was changed to be beneath the fuselage. The Lavi fighter jet was also equipped with the Pratt & Whitney PW1120 engine, which the United States was developing for its F-15 fighter. In Israel, the Lavi was used as a low-end aircraft for the Israeli Air Force, primarily for close air support, ground attack missions, and interception of air threats. It was equipped with a 30mm cannon for underwing hardpoints for various missiles and bombs, and 7 under-fuselage hardpoints capable of carrying 6 -80 Malawian Quachas series bombs and 2 wingtip hardpoints for infrared-guided air-to-air combat missiles. So, despite the Lavi being a lightweight fighter, it had numerous hardpoints designed for carrying various bombs and supporting ground targets. Israel extensively used composite materials in the construction of the Lavi, with a proportion of 22%. In 1979, Israel revealed the design, and in 1981, it selected the Pratt & Whitney PW1120 engine for the aircraft. In 1986, the first Lavi prototype was ready for service, and the maiden flight took place the same year. The Lavi fighter jet was a joint development effort between Israel and the United States. Most of the funding came from U.S. military aid, although the United States didn't particularly need such an aircraft since it already had the F-15 and F-16 fighters. As the development costs and the price of the individual aircraft increased, tensions grew between Israel and the United States. Eventually, under U.S. pressure, Israel halted the Lavi development program in 1987. However, at that point, the Israeli aircraft industries had already completed 3 prototype aircraft. China successfully imported the technical blueprints of Israel's Lavi fighter jet during the 1980s and used them as the foundation for developing its own J-10 fighter. Comparing the J-10 and the Lavi fighter jet, their aerodynamic layouts are strikingly similar, featuring triangular wings and canards. The geometric shape of the tail section and the engine area are almost identical, with both aircraft having 2 strakes underneath the engine. Such a high degree of similarity in design cannot be a mere coincidence. During this time, one can also find evidence online of Chinese engineers visiting Israel to examine the Lavi fighter jet, indicating the close cooperation between the two countries in aviation technology. One noticeable difference is the positioning of the canards. The Israeli Lavi fighter jet had canards located closer to the main wing, which is considered near-coupled canards. This design is similar to that of the French Rafale fighter. On the other hand, Chengdu Aircraft Industry Group adjusted the canard's position to a slightly more forward location, a medium-coupled canards arrangement. The reason for this difference might be that Israel has limited airspace and numerous small airfields, so the emphasis was on short-distance takeoff capability. The near-coupled canards help increase lift significantly. As a comparison, the Swedish Saab JAS-39 Gripen fighter jet also uses a similar aerodynamic layout and can take off within a short distance. China didn't require this short-distance takeoff capability due to its vast territory and multiple airfields, so the positioning of canards being adjusted is not surprising. In summary, it's clear that Israel's technical support played a significant role in the development of China's J-10 fighter. China's modern fighter aircraft technology, air-to-air missile technology, radar technology, early warning aircraft, drones, and more have been influenced by Israel. This cooperation was built during a time of closer ties between China and the West. It's worth mentioning that in recent years, both Ukraine and Israel have faced challenging situations with China. The Russian invasion of Ukraine led to a shift in Ukraine's perspective towards the Chinese government. Moreover, the recent conflict between Hamas and Israel, in which Hamas carried out attacks and took Israeli citizens hostage, led to disappointment on the part of Israel when China chose not to condemn these acts of terrorism. Over the last 30 years, China's military technology advancement has depended on two countries, Ukraine and Israel, for critical support. Ukraine provided extensive help to China in aircraft carrier-based aircraft, and aviation engine technology. Israel, on the other hand, supported China in fighter aircraft, air-to-air missile, radar, early warning aircraft, and drone technologies. These partnerships have been significant contributors to China's military capabilities. Nevertheless, it is important to consider the diplomatic and geopolitical consequences of such relationships, especially when geopolitical situations change. Helping others is a noble endeavor, but choosing who to help and who to befriend is a matter of careful consideration. If you select the wrong partners, assistance can inadvertently support harmful actions. The lessons learned from Ukraine and Israel serve